Imposter syndrome. What is reality? I am a plaster doll. I pose with eyes that cut open without landfall or nightfall upon some shellacked and grinning person. Eyes that open, blue, steel, and close. Am I approximately an eye? Anne Sexton, Self in 1958. Anne Sexton, by her own admission, was not made for motherhood. Although she did not commit suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning until her 2 girls were grown, she did suffer postpartum breakdowns, and she abused her children. She had been a victim of neglect and incest as a child, and as a result remained a victim in need of care herself. She could not accept the level of responsibility that came with being a mother. Sylvia Plath took her own life when her children were still babies. Did Plath and Sexton suffocate themselves because the role of motherhood was suffocating them? I don't believe so, but I do believe they didn't feel comfortable in their own skins as mothers. They felt they were imposters playing a role they should never have been cast in. And imposter syndrome isn't something many mothers admit to experiencing. The first time I suffered from imposter syndrome wasn't when I became a mother. It was in graduate school when I taught my first class. I was 25, close in age to most of my students, and even younger than a few of them. What did I know about teaching English composition? I didn't know how to teach anything. Armed with 12 pages of notes for my first 50-minute class, I stood in front of 25 undergraduate students at San Diego State. Every part of my body was shaking. My trembling hands caused the notes in my hands to shake, a rustling sound that was deafening in the silent room. As I looked at the rows of faces staring at me expectantly, I froze. I was convinced that at any moment the real instructor would walk in and I would be exposed for the imposter that I was. The second time I experienced this syndrome was when I became a mother to premature twins, and I had no earthly idea what I was supposed to do with them. As an educated woman, I had read all the books that are supposed to help women prepare for and navigate the pitfalls of motherhood. But books like What to Expect When You're Expecting and What to Expect the First Year are not all that helpful to women whose pregnancies go awry. A book I should have read, but I knew nothing about at the time, was Adrienne Rich's Of Woman Born. She writes, "My children cause me the most exquisite suffering of which I have any experience. It is the suffering of ambivalence, the murderous alternation between bitter resentment and raw-edged nerves, and blissful gratification and tenderness. Sometimes I seem to myself, in my feelings toward these tiny guiltless beings, a monster of selfishness and intolerance. Their voices wear away at my nerves, their constant needs, above all their need for simplicity and patience, fill me with despair at my own failures, despair too at my fate, which is to serve a function for which I was not fitted. And I am weak sometimes from held-in rage. There are times when I feel only death will free us from one another, when I envy the barren woman who has the luxury of her regrets but lives a life of privacy and freedom." Such brutal honesty was unheard of in our society until Charlotte Perkins Gilman, followed by Adrienne Rich, Anne Sexton, Sylvia Plath, and Nancy Mayers, all had the nerve to speak the bitter truth. And each woman paid the price by bearing harsh criticism and in some cases even being ostracized by the society in which she lived. Yet I needed this level of honesty when my own body was trying to heal and I was staring at 2 babies so small they looked nothing like human beings, all tubes and wires and giant heads atop grotesquely small bodies. Adrienne Rich's words were what I needed to hear when I was kept awake for days on end by apnea monitor alarms that would leave me peeling myself off the ceiling every time my baby stopped breathing, and sobbing uncontrollably when I couldn't get my colicky son to stop screaming so that I could get 5 minutes of rest. I needed brutal honesty, not instructions on how to give the first bath and suggestions as to when to transition to solid foods. I needed to know that I wasn't a horrific mother because I wasn't bonding. I wasn't blissful, and I wasn't happy. I was exhausted, depressed, and at times almost hopeless.